Masechet Nedarim Daf Ayin Gimel. We've been speaking about whether a husband has to actually hear the particulars of a vow in order to annul it, or he can annul a generality, all the vows that you have made or that you're going to make in this certain time period. That was inconclusive, but we're going to follow that up with a related question. Ba'ed ami bar Hama, Cheresh mahu sheyafer leishto. Can a deaf husband annul his wife's vows? The problem is he cannot hear at all, so he is not even in potential, is not able to hear about the particulars of the vow. Not sure what we would say today when we have better means of communication with sign language or other ways, but let's assume that he has to hear it and he can't hear it. אם תמסר לומר בעל מפר בלא שמיעה משום דבר משמעהו אבל חרש דלאו בר משמעהו היינו דרבי זרע. If you say that a husband can annul the vow, even if you say that a husband can annul the vow without hearing the particulars. In other words, if the previous question, if the husband has to hear this exact vow, what exactly did you say? And he has to hear those details in order to nullify it, then there's not going to be a question that a deaf person will not be able to. But let's say we say that in the general case, a hearing husband can annul vows generally without hearing the particulars. So is that only because he is someone who's capable of hearing in potential? That's why he can. But a deaf man who even in potential would not be able to hear it, then he cannot. Hainu de Rabbi Zera, and that would fit with Rabbi Zera's opinion in a different matter. Deramad Rabbi Zera kol hara'ui lebila en bila me'akevet bo v'chol she'en ra'ui lebila bila me'akevet bo. Rabbi Zera is applying this to the laws of meal offerings, where there's a maximum amount you can bring of flour. The maximum amount is 60 isaron. Right, about 150 liters. Why? Because the biggest bowl that they had in the Bet HaMikdash could hold 60 isaron and still have room to put oil and mix it well. If it's any more than 60 isaron, then you have to split it into two bowls so that you can mix it properly. Okay, that's a general law. Now, Rabbi Zera says, listen, even though lechatechila, you're supposed to mix it, the oil and the flour together for a meal offering, what if he didn't mix it? Right? Is it okay if he just poured it in but did not mix it? So Rabbi Zera says, yes, it's okay, as long as the bowl is big enough that you could mix it in potential, then it's okay. That if you didn't mix it, it's b'di'avad, it's fine. However, if the bowl was not big enough, the flour was too much, that even potentially you would not be able to mix it, then it is a problem, because you didn't mix it, even b'di'avad, it's no good. So Rabbi Zera here gives us the general principle that as long as in potential you can do something, it's valid, even if you don't actually do it, because potentially you could have done it. Whereas if there's no potential you could not have done, there's no possibility of doing it, and then b'di'avad, it's no good because that you didn't do it. And so we're applying the same thing here, even though a hearing husband does not have to hear the particular vow in order to annul it, because he can hear it in potential. He has the ability to hear it. Since he has the ability to hear it, doesn't actually have to hear it. But a deaf man who cannot even in potential hear it, he would not be able to annul his wife's vows. Okay, all that is side number one, that a deaf husband cannot annul his wife's vow. Or dilma v'shama isha v'lo me'akev. Or do we say, it says the husband has to hear it, but maybe that is not essential. It's good if the husband hears it, so he knows exactly what he's annulling. But if he wants to say something in a general way, or even if he can't hear at all, but he decides, I don't want this vow, whatever it is, that's fine, and it's not essential. It's not required that he hear it, and even a deaf man can annul a vow. That's the question. Amar Rava tashma v'shamah isha perat li eshet cheresh shema amina. Rava says, I have an answer. Because the pasuk says that the husband has to hear it, shama isha means ish shelah, her husband hears it. We learn that means davka. The braita, midrash halacha, that teaches yes, he has to actually hear it. And that excludes, or at least he has to, in potential, be able to hear it. Right? We're not answering the prior question right now about whether he actually has to hear the particular or not. But the point is that the Shema Isha comes to those extra words. Why do you have to say that? Is coming to exclude a deaf person who, even in potential, cannot hear it. Shema Amina, and that's the answer. It would be a problem. Okay, last question on this Mishnah. It means he's married to two women, and both of them make vows, and he hears them on the same day. Can he nullify both of them simultaneously? Right? In one shot, he said, both of your vows are nullified, or does he have to deal with each one separately? That's the question. Otah davka or lav davka. The word otah in this pasuk says v'im b'yom shema isha yani otah. If the husband, on the day that he hears of a vow, her husband restrains her, so it says yani otah, he restrains or prevents the vow, and it says otah, of her vow. So it says otah, that is in singular. So do we take that to refer otah davka to one wife, and so he has to do each one separately, or lav davka, or the language is not precise. It's just usually it's of her vow, but because usually one, but really he could do both together at once. That's the question. Amar Ravina. Tashema en mashkin shete sotot ka'achat mipnei shelibah gas bechaverta. So we're going to learn by analogy to sotah. We have a similar law, and we learn that a man who's married to two wives, and he suspects both of them of adultery, and so he brings sotah charges upon both of them. We do not give both of them to drink in one ceremony, because part of the goal of the sotah ritual is to scare her enough that she would admit if in fact she was guilty. The problem is, if there's two together, since co-wives are generally jealous of each other, and so one of them is not going to want to admit I was an adulterer and watch the other one get off, be all good and proper, and she's the only bad one. So she would rather, she would rather drink the sotah water, consequences come what may, rather than give any emboldenedness to her co-wife. In other words, gas bechaverta, each one is emboldened in the presence of the other to say, no, I'm not going to let myself be degraded in front of the other, so I will not admit. So therefore, we do the sotah rituals separately. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the law that you cannot have two sotot drink at the same time, but not because of this reasoning, but rather because of the pasuk is a Gezerat HaKatuv, says vishka, right, that he will make her drink. And that is singular, right? Her, and so that means her alone. She has to do it alone, separately, not simultaneously. So just like we learned, hishka means precisely one person at a time. So to otah, regarding a vow, means her vow and only her alone. So the husband has to undo each vow, the vows of each wife separately. Okay, next Mishnah. Bogedet sheshata shnemasar chodesh v'almana sheloshim yom. Rabbi Eliezer omer ho'ilu ba'ala chaya b'mzonotea yafer. Hachamim omerim en ha'ba'al mefer ad shetikanes lirshuto. If you have an adult woman more than 12 and a half, and she did kiddushin, and the expectation is that we'll give her a certain amount of time, 12 months, in order to get herself ready. so that she can marry. So if she waited all those 12 months and the husband still did not do the nisu'in, or for an almanah, if she's a widow, she needs less time to get herself ready, only 30 days. So they did kiddushin. 30 days later is the time for nisu'in, and we expect the husband to go ahead with the nisu'in, because nisu'in is when his financial obligation kicks in. He has to provide food, and clothing, and everything for her. So Rabbi Eliezer says, since the husband is from then at that point on required to give her sustenance, he also gets the responsibility and the possibility of annulling her vows. In other words, while she is only engaged, only arusa, either bogeret for those less than 12 months, or amana, those 30 days, the husband does not have to provide for her, and he also does not have a right alone to annul her vows if she's young. Well, this is in neither cases would a father be involved, because either she's bogeret or amana. In either case, the father is out of the picture. So in both these cases, the husband cannot annul her vows while she is in arusa, until he becomes responsible for her financially. Then that comes together with annulling her vows. Right? Often that comes together. She may make a vow that has financial implications. So if he's financially responsible, then he has the right to annul the vows. That is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. However, Chamim say no, even after the husband is financially obligated, because the 12 months have passed or the 30 days have passed. Nevertheless, annulling vows does not come under his jurisdiction until the actual nisu'in. It's not connected to the financial obligation. It's only dependent on them actually being married and living together. All right, that's the two opinions in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer Mishnah Rishona Amru Davar Echad. Rabbah makes the following proposition, hypothesis. We're going to see two rejections of it, but this is his opinion. He thinks that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion and the Mishnah Rishona in the following Mishnah from Masechet Ketubot are both in agreement. They're both in agreement that once the 12-month deadline happens and the husband is responsible to pay, to feed his wife, to feed his bride, at that point they're also considered fully married for other laws. Rabbi Eliezer, regarding the law, says it's true regarding the law of annulling vows, that he now has the right to annul her vows. And the Mishnah Rishonah is going to be talking about that if he's a Kohen, he can have her eat terumah. Okay, so they're talking about two different laws. Rabbi Eliezer about vows, the following Mishnah about eating terumah, but what they have in common is that even though both of these laws generally do not kick in until the nisu'in, nevertheless, once the 12-month happens, and although nisu'in did not happen, because he's financially responsible for her, these laws also kick in as if they were fully married. And in that sense, they agree with each other. And probably, even though they're talking about different cases, they would agree with the other. Rabbi Eliezer would agree regarding terumah, and this Mishnah would agree with Rabbi Eliezer regarding vows. So let's say the Mishnah. דתנן, נותנים לבתולה 12 חודש לפרנס עצמה. הגיע 12 חודש, אוכלת משלו, ואוכלת בתרומה. We give a betula, if it's her first time being married, we give her 12 months to get herself ready, buy all the things that she will need for the wedding, for building their new home. But once 12 months comes, then that's it. The deadline came, and the husband now is responsible to feed her, and she can eat his food, and she can eat even terumah. So that's the key here. She can eat terumah even though she's home. In general, on a deoraita level, she would be able to eat terumah even when she is only engaged, arusa. But the rabbis are afraid that if he's going to send terumah over to her while she's in her father's house, her brothers or parents are going to come say, oh, that looks good, and they're going to eat even though they are not kohanim. and they're not engaged to Kohanim, and so the rabbis worry about it. But once the 12 months comes, since he's paying for her food, he's going to send her food. He doesn't want everybody to eat his food, so he's going to designate a particular spot. Here, come eat here, and then they will be careful not to mix the food and share it with others. So that's the reasoning here. However, all this is only true for an arus. That's an arusa. After 12 months, he has to pay for her, and she can eat teruma. But if it's a yavam, in other words, a guy died without children, and now the yavam has an obligation to marry. But that obligation, that zikah, is not really connected, not really married. And so that's not sufficient to allow her to eat teruma. Okay, and this is true under any circumstance. For example, 12 months already passed. Let's say, it could be any breakdown. Let's say she was 6 months with her groom. We're talking about she was arusa to a man for 6 months. He died, without children. He doesn't have any children from a previous marriage or anything. So you still have to do yibum, even though there was only erusin. And so now she waited another 6 months while the yavam is doing whatever he has to do. Even though 12 months have passed, still, she cannot eat teruma. Even if 11 months and 29 days she was engaged, arusa, and her husband died, or she was engaged to her husband, to the first guy, for 1 day, and he died, and then she's with the yavam all the time after that, and now chelet bitruma doesn't matter. She does not eat teruma. That's the general rule. A yavam does not allow his yavama to eat teruma. Zo mishnah rishona. All that was the original teaching. However, betin shel acharehem amru en haisha ochelet bitruma af ad shetikanes lachupa. However, a betin came after and made a new institution, and they said a woman cannot eat teruma until the actual marriage. So you see that if you follow the new betin, the new law, then you actually have to be married. You have to actually have nisuin in order for the full marriage to kick in. And so that would not be like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says after the 12-month deadline, even before nisuin, that's already it's as if there is nisuin. So that's why we're comparing Rabbi Eliezer to the Mishnah Rishona. Just like Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah here says that after 12 months the husband can annul his wife's vows, the bride's vows, so too Mishnah Rishona says after 12 months she can eat teruma as if they are fully married. And so you see, Rabbah is proposing that they would agree with each other. Good. However, we can reject this in either direction. Amar Abaye, Dilma lo hi ad kan lo ashmi'nan mishnah rishona, ela lemechal bitruma derabanan, aval nedarim deoraita emala. Now maybe that mishnah rishona, that original law, was only lenient because it was talking about teruma that is a teruma status midrabanan. Like nowadays, where teruma is only, you have to give teruma, but it's only derabanan. And that's why, so we're lenient. Okay, you're not fully married, but in the 12 months past, all right, so we'll allow her to have the Rabbanan. That's why the Mishnah Rishona was lenient. But regarding Nedarim, which is Mideoraita, at all times, even after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, if someone makes a vow that has Deoraita status, and the laws of annulling the vow, these are all Deoraita. So the Torah says only once they're fully married, then he can annul the vow, and but not beforehand. So therefore, that Mishnah Rishona in Masechet Ketubot would agree only that after 12 months the husband can feed his bride teruma, but would not agree with Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah that he can annul her vows. And so no, there is no equivalence. And you can also reject Rabbah in the other way around. Vad kan lo shamat le Rabbi Eliezer ela gabe nedarim. And maybe Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah here in Nedarim only thinks that for vows, yes, that's when the husband can annul the vows even before the Nisu'in, after the 12-month deadline, because he will agree with what Rab Pinchas eventually says, which is that whenever a woman makes a vow, she does it having in mind that her husband will consent to it. So there, it's just dependent on the circumstances, and yeah, she's going to say, I'm going to make this vow. She has in mind, of assuming if my groom, husband-to-be, is going to annul it, then it won't work. So because she has that in mind, that's why, even though it's Deoraita, still it works. It's like a condition that's built in. However, Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah may very well not agree with the Mishnah Rishona in Ketubot and say that Teruma, even if Teruma nowadays we're talking about the Rabbanan Teruma, that if they're not fully married, then no, you cannot eat Teruma. Even before the Betin stepped in, they would not necessarily, even Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah would be lenient regarding vows, because that's dependent on her mindset, but not agree with Teruma, and therefore these are two ways of rejecting Rabbah's proposition. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'Amen.